So the Gorton and Denton by-election is in 2 days' time. 2 days till we find out if it will be Reform or the Greens or Labour, but very unlikely Labour, that will be gaining an MP in the House of Commons. And I don't know which way it's going to go. I think the Greens will win, but it will depend on the swing voters, the undecided voters. And I think the majority of those people will be Labour voters that are thinking, do they vote Labour because they think that they'll be able to stop reform? Or do they vote Green because they've got a better chance of stopping reform? And I think, obviously, people that aren't as in tune with politics and are just going about their day-to-day life, they probably think Labour is still more of a realistic possibility than the Greens. But as they walk around Gorton and Denton and they see the Green posters in the windows and they see everybody campaigning, I think enough of them will swap over to the Greens, and that will get them over the line. But it could honestly be less than 1,000 votes between first and second, so it is incredibly close and incredibly tight. But yeah, I think it would be obviously very good if a Green got in, increased their numbers slightly. She's obviously the best candidate out of the three. So yeah, I just wanted to review a clip and analyse a clip of Zack Polanski in an interview he did yesterday, I believe, talking about the by-election when he was in Manchester. Let's see what he had to say.
We know that ultimately this election will be decided on Thursday by how many people we get on the ground volunteering and speaking to people. It's very clear the election is between the Reform Party and the Green Party. In Reform, Nigel Farage's candidate, we have a man who is literally paid to spread hate and division on TV. And in our Green Party candidate, Hannah Spencer, we have a local plumber who knows the value of work, who oozes compassion and empathy, and I think will not just be an amazing contributor for Gorton and Denton and for the Green Party, but frankly will elevate politics inside this country, because I think we desperately need people on those green benches that actually listen, that don't have pre-prepared answers, that are just alive and present in the moment, and that's Hannah Spencer. And so I'm so incredibly excited at this opportunity to get her elected, and frankly incredibly nervous at the even thought that on Friday morning we could be seeing Nigel Farage celebrate. I think that would be deeply damaging for the country. I think that would send the Labour government in an even worse direction, whereas I think a Green Party win will both be important for Gorton and Denton, but frankly that will send the clearest possible message to this government that they've been on completely the wrong course.
Yeah, and I think that is a really, really good point. When people make the argument that what's the point of voting for a party that's not going to form a government, or at least not immediately going to form a government, people forget that if they get enough votes and they get enough influence in the Commons, they can affect what the government do. They have a sway. They can sway them to policies that they believe in. And we've seen that with Reform. Even though they've only got a handful of MPs, because they're leading the polls, Labour have surrendered to them in a lot of ways and have tried to persuade the Reform voters to their side by being harsher on immigration and, being hard on pensioners, PIP payments, two-child benefit cap, all these things that they've done since they got in, and then eventually U-turned because there's been enough of a sort of left-wing pushback, either within the Labour Party, because obviously the Labour Party at large is a lot more left-wing than the actual Labour government is, or other parties like the Greens, or independents, or your party, like Corbyn and Sultana. Everyone's pushed back from the left, and that then means these things get U-turned, and in future, hopefully we don't need U-turns, they just make better policies because they realise that they can't ignore the left. They can't ostracise the left. They can't kick them out of their own party because they won't be able to win elections anymore. And I think we're already at that point. I know the bookies still have Labour as joint favourites to win the next general election, but I really do think there is a world in which Labour get less than 100 seats. I don't think that's impossible. I think they could genuinely get less than 100 seats in the next election. If it continues the way it is, it will depend on who the next leader is after Keir Starmer and what they do as well. But if it continues on this trajectory, they've got no hope. They've got no hope. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
With absolute clarity, what Keir Starmer and this Labour government have said on drugs policy is vile. It debases politics, and actually I think people are sick of it, because I think people recognise it's an attack on a party that's trying to have a sensible, grown-up conversation about a really serious issue. We have the worst amount of drug deaths in the whole of Europe, and I think that fact's often missing from this conversation. Well, the war on drugs is totally failed, and right now people can get drugs. Sadly, in a playground, people have access to drugs. So what we're talking about is regulating drugs. We're saying if people are going to buy drugs, are they going to buy them on street corners, down alleyways, or actually we're going to take a public health approach, which is about harm reduction. You don't need to take my word for it. You could take David Lammy's word for it. Just a few years ago, he was saying the same thing. You could listen to Nigel Farage in 2014, who said, the war on drugs has failed, we need to legalise some drugs. So these politicians are frankly full of hypocrites. They're people who said one thing a few years ago when they looked at the evidence, and when it comes to a by-election where they can make cheap political attacks for short-term gains, they're launching these attacks. But the people who really suffer are the people in this country who are suffering from a problematic relationship with drugs, who really need that support from public health experts.
And that's exactly the point. They know that regulating drugs and being less harsh in terms of criminal sentencing for people who take drugs improves the situation. But they know it's unpopular with the public, and they can't be asked to try and change people's point of view on it because it would take a lot of effort, and they don't see it as that much of a gain, especially because it doesn't affect their donors. Their donors don't care. So when the Greens say that they want to do that, they don't think, oh, is it a good idea or not? Is it something that we could implement? They think, yes, that's unpopular, so we can now attack them with it. And we can just go, they want all kids to be on heroin or coke or whatever, and they want date rape drugs to be readily accessible for everybody so that they can go do horrendous things. And obviously that's not true, and they know it's not true, but they say it to get the public to not be persuaded by some of his policies, which are in general in their best interests. And that's the nature of politics. It's about getting people to vote for what's in their best interests, and most political parties do not do that.
Depends what your definition of Zionism is. I'm really clear, though, that Benjamin Netanyahu is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people, a genocide that our government is not just complicit in, but actively enabling. I don't think it's offensive to call that racist. In fact, I think it's offensive to turn your back from it or to be complicit, and I think that's where the real conversation should be. I mean, it's difficult to even respond to that because for years now, anyone who has a phone or a TV screen has seen pictures of dead children, of people with their heads blown off, of some of the most brutal and dystopian scenes that I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Hamas, though? Isn't that ultimately because Hamas did what they did on October 7th?
What happened on October 7th was...
I can't believe that we're still going round and round and round with... It's been years at this point. They're still like, well, what about Hamas on October 7th? Does Israel have the right to exist? It's like, are we really having these questions still? When you see what they do day in, day out, and we're like, well, it's not great. We don't really like it, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? You know, Jews need their own sovereign state, apparently. And I think that there should be a state in which Jewish people should be free to live and not be harassed, not be killed, like obviously what happened in Nazi Germany and what's happened throughout history to Jewish people. I'm not saying that they obviously haven't been attacked and killed and made into slaves. There's been horrendous things that have happened to them. But there should be states in which they are free, which I think is a lot of the Western world now. But what you can't have is a Jewish state. Just the same as you can't have a white state. Just the same as you can't have a Catholic state. Or even, in my opinion, you can't have a Muslim state. You can't have a state in which you have to be of a certain ethnicity or religion to live there. That is not ethical. That is immoral. That is wrong. It's as simple as that. So, when people say, does Israel have a right to exist? No country has a right to exist. People have a right to exist. The Israeli people have a right to exist. Should they be in that land? Should they be in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, because it's part of their religious book? In my opinion, no. Just the same as nobody has a right to specific land, in my opinion. That's nationalism. That's something that Reform would agree with, potentially. Or Restore. Obviously, all of Restore would agree with that. So, no. I don't think that Israel as a nation state has a right to exist, but Israeli people do. And that's the clear clarity of it. And we're still having this discussion years later, and it's just ridiculous.
Absolutely outrageous and a horrific attack. And nothing justifies what Israel have done for the last couple of years, that, again, our government is not just complicit in, but actively enabling. We could certainly stop our role in this by stopping selling arms to Israel, by stopping sharing intelligence, and making sure that we're speaking with one voice, that it's time to end the genocide. Well, it's helpful in this conversation that you're talking to a Jewish man from Manchester. In fact, I'm one of 5 Jewish people in British political history who have been in positions of leadership in politics. So I take anti-Semitism really seriously. I've experienced it myself. And I take Islamophobia seriously and any form of racism and hatred. I also take equally seriously the conflation of anti-Semitism with criticism of the Israeli government. And we need to be absolutely clear when we're criticising Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government and when we're criticising anti-Semitism. And actually what I find more cynical than anything is when people like Michael Gove, or indeed Sarah Vine, who compared me to Adolf Hitler this week. I mean, it doesn't get much more anti-Semitic than comparing a Jewish man speaking out against a genocide to one of the worst atrocities that ever happened to Jewish people. I mean, it's difficult to even be coherent about this word because it's absurd we're even having this conversation. It's not me that's saying it's a genocide in Israel, although I am saying that. It's lots and lots of scholars, genocide scholars, it's Amnesty International, it's the United Nations, it's the International Criminal Court who put out a warrant on Benjamin Netanyahu. I want to say this is not baked in. In fact, I had a meeting with Miles' campaign manager about an hour ago.
And yeah, I've got to stop there, otherwise this video is going to go on too long. But yeah, he says that obviously he's nervous about a Reform win, and I think everybody on our side of the aisle is nervous of a Reform win. It would galvanise them. It would have a big sway, I think, in the sort of optics with the sort of general public that aren't so engaged with politics. They'll see Reform win a seat and they'll be like, oh, okay, so they're doing quite well then. And that would galvanise more people to vote for them. So I think this is actually a really important by-election. And we've only got 2 days left. So I will do probably another video on this tomorrow if there's more information, more things to look at, and then it will be the big day, and we'll see what happens. But that will be it for this video. If you like what I'm doing and you want to see me do more, like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your opinion. Do you think that the Greens will win this by-election? And let's see what happens. See you guys.